I never thought a necklace could destroy my life. I promised him I'd never take it off, and for months, I didn't. But when I finally learned why he made me wear it, everything I believed about love, safety, and trust shattered.
Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day.
The moment his fingers wrapped around my neck, I couldn't breathe. Not just because of the pressure, but because I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me. My husband. The same man who used to kiss my forehead every morning and bring me coffee in bed. He pulled the delicate gold necklace tight, his voice low and sharp as a blade. If you ever take that necklace off, that might be the last time you breathe. I froze. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. Honey, you're scaring me, I whispered, my voice shaking. Never, not once, had he raised his voice at me like this. He'd always been gentle, patient. But in that moment, his eyes were wild, and the man I married was nowhere to be found. Promise me, he barked, gripping my shoulders. I nodded slowly, terrified. I promise. And God, I should never have said those words, because everything after that night became a nightmare. He started texting me constantly. Asterisk, where are you? Who are you with? When will you be home? Asterisk. Even when I went out with friends, I'd catch a glimpse of him, lurking in the corner of a bar, sitting in his car outside a cafe, watching, always watching. Every time the necklace around my neck gave off a soft beep, he was there. I could feel it. It was like that little sound was his cue. I told myself I was being paranoid. He wouldn't do that to me. I kept repeating. He loves me, but my gut wouldn't shut up. Something about that necklace wasn't right. Then, the headache started. Sharp, relentless pain that would wake me up in the middle of the night. Dizziness that made the world spin when I stood up. A bone-deep exhaustion I couldn't shake no matter how much I slept. When I told him about it, his reaction wasn't what you'd expect from a worried husband. His eyes scanned me up and down like he was checking off a list. Any numbness? Blurred vision? Trouble breathing? His questions were so precise it made my skin crawl. How did he know to ask that? The symptoms grew worse with each passing day. At work, my vision blurred so badly I couldn't read my screen. My thoughts got foggy. I'd forget what I was doing in the middle of doing it. And every time the nausea hit, the necklace would vibrate, almost like it was alive. One night, I decided to take it off, just to see, just to breathe. But before I could even test if the symptoms faded, he saw it sitting on my nightstand. His face twisted with panic and rage. You promised me. You can't take it off. He forced it back onto my neck while I lay in bed too weak to fight. The next morning, everything changed. I was in the kitchen when my knees gave out. My vision narrowed to black, and the left side of my body went numb. My arm tingled like pins stabbing into my skin. The necklace burned against my chest, beeping so loudly it filled the whole house. He appeared within seconds, not rushing to help me, but whispering under his breath. Thank God it worked. It worked. His hand rested on the necklace like it was something sacred, and he was smiling. Smiling. Then, paramedics. Out of nowhere. I hadn't called anyone, but they knew exactly what was happening. And he explained my symptoms to them in perfect detail, even the things I never told him about. My blood ran cold. If he wanted me dead, why call for help? On the ambulance ride, he held my hand like the loving husband he once was, whispering, it's gonna be okay. At the hospital, the doctor came in, a clipboard in hand, and said words I wasn't expecting. Ma'am, you have a severe blood clotting disorder. You were minutes away from a stroke. If it weren't for the medical alert necklace and your husband's quick reaction, this could have been fatal. I just stared at him. All this time, I thought he was trying to kill me. And here he was, the hero. My husband reached for my hand again, his eyes glistening. I didn't mean to be controlling. I couldn't lose you. He showed me an app on his phone that tracked my vitals, like he'd been my personal guardian angel. But then the doctor came back, and this time, his face was different, tense. Ma'am, I need to ask something. Are you taking a medication called clomiphene? Because your blood work shows elevated levels. Months of consistent dosing. My stomach dropped. Clomiphene, the doctor explained, can cause severe blood clotting issues at high doses. If I wasn't taking it myself, then someone was giving it to me without my consent. And then my husband walked back into the room with a warm, calm smile. I think she needs rest now, Doc. I'll take it from here. His voice was soft. Too soft. I forced my face into what I hoped was a tired smile and said I was exhausted. He nodded and squeezed my hand again. Gentle, familiar, and now absolutely terrifying. The doctor's jaw tightened, but he left. When the nurse returned, I caught her eye and silently begged for help. She held my gaze just long enough to understand. She told him visiting hours would end in 30 minutes. When he finally left, kissing my forehead, I felt like my lungs worked again for the first time in weeks. I immediately asked to speak to someone privately. That's when Tabitha Caldwell walked in, a calm woman with kind eyes and the quiet strength of someone who's seen too many stories like mine. She introduced herself as the hospital's domestic violence liaison. No judgment, no pressure, just help. The moment I started talking, I broke down. I told her everything. The necklace, the obsessive tracking, the symptoms, the smoothies, the way he forced it back on me. She didn't flinch. She just listened. And when I mentioned the part about him whispering, "It worked," she stopped writing. Her expression hardened. She told me what I already knew deep down. This wasn't love. This wasn't protection. This was control. This was assault. Maybe worse. That's when it clicked. The smoothies. He'd started making them every morning around the time my symptoms began. I'd always drink them because he looked so proud of taking care of me. He wasn't taking care of me. He was poisoning me. We built a timeline together. Every change, every symptom, every piece fell into place. Smoothies, necklace, tracking, control. The nurse returned again, saying my husband had already called to ask about me. Tabitha's body went stiff. She moved fast, had my room flagged, my information locked down, my location removed from the hospital directory. He's already trying to keep control, she said firmly. But now you have us. She explained everything carefully. This wasn't just domestic abuse. This was a crime. She asked if I wanted to speak to a detective who specialized in medical abuse and poisoning cases. I was terrified, but for the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and nodded. Yes, call whoever you need. I'm done protecting him. Tabitha didn't waste a second. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving fast as she scrolled through her contacts. When she found the number, she tapped call and set the phone on speaker so I could hear everything. The line rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Tabitha introduced herself calmly but firmly, explaining that she was at the hospital with a patient who suspected her spouse had been poisoning her. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs as I listened. Hearing my situation described out loud like that, domestic violence, medical harm, non-consensual medication, made it feel terrifyingly real. The detective on the other end asked a few precise questions. Tabitha answered them without hesitation. Finally, the woman said she'd be there early tomorrow morning, before visiting hours began. When the call ended, Tabitha turned to me and squeezed my hand. "Detective Petrov is one of the best," she said softly. I nodded, but my brain felt like it was moving through fog. 1 hour ago, my biggest fear was the necklace around my neck. Now, my life had become a police investigation. The nurse came in after Tabitha left, checking my vitals like nothing in the world had changed, even though mine had shattered. She asked if I needed something to help me sleep. I told her no. I needed my head clear. But once the room fell silent, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I stared at the ceiling tiles as the pieces clicked together like some cruel puzzle I should have solved months ago. The smoothies. Every single morning for 4 straight months. Strawberry banana with protein powder, or at least that's what he told me. Always ready the moment I walked out of the bathroom. Always followed by that proud smile as I drank it. Then there was the chamomile tea at night. My favorite mug. 2 sugars. I thought it was sweet that he remembered the little things. Now I wondered what else he was stirring into those cups. The vitamins too. Neatly laid out in a little dish next to my plate like he was some kind of caretaker. I never once checked the bottles. Never once questioned him. Because I loved him. Because I trusted him. I'd handed him control over what I put into my body, and he'd used it to slowly destroy me. Even the necklace, this thing that had saved my life, had been turned into a tool for control. A leash disguised as protection. Eventually, at some point, I drifted off into a shallow, uneasy sleep. A soft knock pulled me awake. Pale light was just starting to creep through the window when a woman walked in, carrying a coffee cup in one hand and a worn leather bag in the other. Dark hair in a ponytail, tired but kind eyes. She introduced herself as Detective Petrov and apologized for showing up so early. "I wanted to talk before he gets here," she said simply. I pushed myself upright in bed as she pulled a chair close. She explained that she needed my story in my own words and asked if I was okay with her recording. I said yes. She clicked on a small recorder, stated the date, time, and our names, then met my eyes. "Start wherever you're ready." So I did. I told her everything, the smoothies, the obsessive control, the tracking, the necklace, the day I collapsed. I described the way he'd followed me to the car one morning, insisting I finish my drink while standing barefoot in his pajamas in the driveway. How he'd started working from home more often around that time, watching me constantly. Petrov wrote fast, her pen scratching across the page. She asked about his job, and when I said, pharmaceutical sales, her whole expression shifted, harder, sharper. "That means he might have access to medications that aren't easy to get," she explained, "including things like clomiphene." The thought made my stomach twist. His office at home had always been locked. I'd never questioned it. The doctor came in with a tablet, updating us that my clotting factors were improving now that I wasn't being exposed to whatever was in my system. Petrov asked if they could run a full tox screen, looking for other drugs. He agreed and said results would take a few days but would give a full picture. Tabitha returned not long after, a folder tucked under her arm. She laid out a series of forms on my bed and explained each one carefully. One allowed the hospital to preserve blood samples and share results with law enforcement. Another explained emergency protective orders to keep him away from me. I stared at the papers. My hands shook as I picked up the pen. Signing my name felt like watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. My signature came out jagged, uneven. Tabitha rested a hand on my shoulder. "This is you taking your life back," she reminded me. Then my phone buzzed. His name lit up the screen. Then again. and again. Detective Petrov asked if she could check the voicemails. I unlocked the phone with trembling fingers. The first message was soft, concerned. His loving husband voice. The second one impatient. The third a sharp. That same tone from the night he made me promise to wear the necklace. You need to answer me. I have a right to know what's happening to my wife. 37 calls in 2 hours. Seeing the numbers stacked up like that was like a punch to the chest. I'd spent months convincing myself it was love. But love doesn't stalk. Love doesn't poison. Petrov photographed my call log. This pattern fits exactly what we see in coercive control cases, she said quietly. She told me she'd be requesting a search warrant for the house. That meant he'd know, which meant things could escalate fast. Before I could panic, Tabitha stepped in. She explained she'd already arranged a safe place for me to go. A private domestic violence shelter, location confidential. I'd have legal support, counseling, and time to rebuild without looking over my shoulder. Everything was happening so fast I could barely breathe. But Tabitha looked me dead in the eyes. He nearly killed you. Acting fast isn't optional. It's survival. A few hours later, Petrov stepped back in with news. The judge had signed the warrant. The search would happen the next morning while he was at work. She made it clear I wasn't to be there under any circumstances. That night, I was just starting to settle when I heard shouting down the hall. His voice, loud, demanding, angry. He was at the nurse's station arguing, insisting he had the right to see me. The nurse held firm, repeating my privacy requests. His voice rose, security arrived, and I listened as they escorted him out. My heart pounded in my ears, but when Tabitha came in afterward, she wasn't surprised. This is what happens when abusers lose control, she said gently. This is exactly why we have to move fast. I barely slept. Every sound in the hallway felt like a threat. Every footstep made me tense. Around midnight, the nurse brought me something to help me rest. She promised I was safe. Security was on the floor. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. But this time, it was Petrov. We found it, she said. Hidden in our garage behind some boxes, they'd uncovered bulk clomiphene powder, a digital scale, empty capsules, and a notebook. A logbook. Every date, every dose, meticulously recorded in his handwriting. My blood went cold. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of weakness. He'd planned every drop that went into my body. Petrov's voice softened as she explained that the evidence was overwhelming. With the notebook, the drugs, and my medical records, the case was strong. The prosecutor would likely file charges within the day. He would be arrested. And for the first time in months, the fear sitting on my chest shifted just a little into something else. Relief. That afternoon, a nurse walked in holding a stack of discharge papers and a clear plastic bag filled with pill bottles. Her voice was calm, practiced, like someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. But I couldn't stop my hands from shaking as she spoke. She explained each medication slowly. The blood thinners, the dosage schedule, the warning signs I needed to watch out for. Take them at the same time every day, she said gently. If you have any unusual bleeding or get dizzy, come back immediately. I nodded like I understood, but my mind felt like it was somewhere far away. When I signed the papers, the pen trembled between my fingers. After she left, I got dressed in the clothes Tabitha had brought from the house the day before. My jeans slipped on easier than I remembered, and that's when I noticed it. How loose they felt around my waist. I'd been so focused on everything else that I hadn't realized how much weight I'd lost. A soft knock on the door pulled me out of that thought. Tabitha stepped in, and this time she wasn't alone. This is Roman, she said, nodding toward the man standing beside her. He had kind eyes, the kind that make you exhale a little without realizing you were holding your breath. He's with the shelter program. He'll drive us there in his car. No official markings. I packed up my plastic hospital bag with the pill bottles and the few things I had, then followed them through the long hallways of the hospital. My head was down the entire time. Every corner we turned made my pulse spike. Even though Detective Petrov had assured me he was still at home, part of me couldn't stop imagining him waiting just around the next corner. Roman's car was parked in the back lot. He opened the back door for me while Tabitha climbed into the passenger seat. As the engine started, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear, like I was sneaking away from my own life. The drive lasted about 20 minutes. Roman kept checking the rearview mirror, not in a paranoid way, but in the quiet, practiced way of someone who'd done this before. I realized he was making sure we weren't being followed. How are you feeling? Tabitha asked, turning slightly in her seat. Scared? I admitted, my voice small. But relieved. She nodded knowingly. That's completely normal. A lot of women feel both at the same time when they finally leave their abuser. The word abuser hit me like a slap. Even after everything, I still wasn't used to hearing it. My husband and abuser didn't feel like words that should exist in the same sentence. But they did now. We pulled up to a quiet house on a tree-lined street. White siding, a neat front yard, flowers along the walkway. It looked ordinary, peaceful, like nothing bad could ever happen there. A woman opened the door before we could even knock. She introduced herself as the shelter director and welcomed me inside like I was family, not a stranger running from hell. The house smelled faintly of coffee and clean laundry. Soft couches in the living room, warm lighting, paintings on the walls. It was the exact opposite of the cold, concrete building I'd pictured in my head. She showed me around the kitchen schedule, the laundry room, how the security system worked. Upstairs, at the end of the hallway, she opened a small bedroom and handed me a key. "Only you have access to this room," she said gently. "And you can lock it from the inside whenever you need to." Inside was a twin bed with a colorful quilt, a little desk under the window, and a dresser. It wasn't much. But when she left me alone and I sat down on the edge of that bed, I started crying. Because for the first time in months, I actually felt safe. I unpacked my few belongings. The pill bottles lined up neatly on the desk like silent little soldiers. My phone buzzed, and Detective Petrov's name lit up the screen. Her voice was calm, steady. "We arrested him an hour ago," she said. "He's been charged with assault with caustic chemicals, administering harmful substances, and domestic violence. Bail hearing is tomorrow. We're asking the judge to include a permanent no-contact order." I didn't say anything for a few seconds, just stared at the wall. My husband was sitting in a jail cell. When I finally hung up, I sat there in silence, letting it sink in. The next morning, Tabitha came to get me. "There's someone I want you to meet," she said. In a small office on the first floor, a woman in her 50s sat waiting with a sleek black briefcase. She introduced herself as Rosemary Mooney, a divorce attorney who volunteered with the shelter's legal program. She wasted no time. "I recommend we file for divorce immediately while the criminal case is active," she explained. "The charges will strengthen your case and help protect your assets." She asked about our house, our bank accounts, everything. My answers came out scattered, but she wrote everything down neatly, methodically. She promised she'd have the papers ready by the end of the week. The days blurred together after that. Meetings, phone calls, legal forms, more signatures than I could keep track of. Rosemary filed for divorce and requested that I get exclusive use of the house once the police finished processing it as evidence. Detective Petrov updated me regularly on the case. The hospital called about my follow-up. Tabitha checked in every day. It felt like my entire life had turned into a never-ending to-do list. And then the toxicology results came back. Petrov asked to meet me at the shelter. I knew from her face before she even spoke that it was bad. She sat down across from me. "The tests found not just clomiphene, but also elevated estrogen levels in your system," she said carefully. My stomach dropped. "He wasn't just poisoning you," she continued. "He was trying to force your body into fertility treatment, likely to get you pregnant without your consent." The words hit like a punch. We talked about having kids. Someday. But I wasn't ready. And instead of respecting that, he decided to take my choice away. I couldn't even describe the feeling. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was violation on a level I didn't have language for. I spent the rest of that day locked in my little room, crying until I was empty. A few days later, Petrov came back with more news. Because of the fertility drugs, the prosecutor was adding reproductive coercion to the list of charges that carried even harsher penalties. She told me the prosecutor, Benjamin Larson, wanted to meet. Benjamin's office was inside the courthouse downtown. Tabitha drove me. He was younger than I expected, late 30s, serious but kind. His desk was covered in files. He explained what a trial would mean. I'd have to testify, be cross-examined, relive everything in front of strangers. He promised the evidence was strong, but he was honest, it would be brutal. I asked for time to think. He gave it. A week later, Rosemary called me in again. My husband's lawyer, Quentin Bauer, had reached out with a plea deal. If he pled guilty, he could get probation and mandatory counseling instead of a full trial. Benjamin joined the call. He explained the trade-off. No trial, no cross-examination, no reliving it all in court. But also a much lighter sentence. Over the next few days, I sat in Tabitha's counseling room with a notepad divided into 2 columns. Trial, public testimony, long process, possible jail time, plea deal, and no testimony, faster resolution, lighter sentence. Neither option felt good. But Tabitha reminded me this was my choice, not anyone else's. 3 days later, I made the call. I told Benjamin I'd accept a plea deal, but only if there was real jail time and a permanent no-contact order. 2 days after that, he called back. The deal was done. 18 months in county jail. 5 years probation. No contact. Ever. When I hung up, I sat in my little room at the shelter, the key to the door still warm in my hand. It wasn't justice in the way I'd once imagined it. But it was enough. And for the first time in a long, long time, the future was mine again. The courthouse was one of those old brick buildings downtown, the kind that looked heavy with history. A line of people shuffled through the metal detectors at the entrance, the sound of belts clinking and bins sliding over the scanner filling the air. Tabitha drove me that morning. Rosemary was already waiting inside the lobby, holding a neat folder against her chest. We rode the elevator up to the 3rd floor in silence. When the doors opened, the hallway smelled faintly of old paper and floor wax. I sat on a hard wooden bench between Tabitha and Rosemary. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Without a word, they each reached out and held one. When they finally called our case, the 3 of us walked through the heavy courtroom doors together. My husband was already inside. He sat at a table with Quentin, his attorney, wearing an orange jumpsuit that somehow made him look smaller. His hair was messy, his eyes sunken with dark circles. When the judge asked if he understood he was pleading guilty to poisoning his wife, his yes was barely a whisper. Flat, dull, like he was already halfway gone. The judge asked him the required questions. Was this plea voluntary? Did he understand his rights? Did anyone force him? He said yes to everything, his voice a monotone I barely recognized. Then the judge turned to me. Would you like to read your statement? My heart pounded against my ribs as I stood. The paper Tabitha had helped me write trembled in my hand. I walked to the podium, staring at the black microphone as if it might bite. And then I spoke. I talked about what his actions had done to me, how they'd shredded my health, how I'd wake up every day with the reminder that my blood could turn against me at any second, how he'd taken away my choice about my body, about children, about my future, how I trusted him completely, and he'd poisoned me with that trust. When I finally looked up, he wasn't even looking at me. His eyes were fixed on the table. The judge accepted the plea. 18 months in county jail. 5 years of supervised probation. A permanent restraining order. Full restitution of my medical and counseling costs. The whole thing took less than an hour. Months of terror, reduced to 60 minutes. In the hallway, Benjamin, the prosecutor, handed me his card. If he ever violates probation, you call me immediately. Tabitha hugged me tight. Rosemary suggested lunch. But all I wanted was to go back to the shelter and sleep. 2 weeks later, Rosemary called with news that didn't sound real at first. She'd found me an apartment. It was paid for through an emergency housing grant, tucked inside a small, secure building with cameras and a locked entry. She drove me over on a warm Saturday afternoon. The one-bedroom was simple but cozy. A tiny kitchen, a view of a park through the second-floor window. That first night, I locked the deadbolt, the latch, and wedged a chair under the doorknob, because safety for me was something physical. And then I slept better than I had in months. The divorce moved quickly. He didn't contest anything from jail. Rosemary filed the paperwork and negotiated the settlement. The house, my car, half the savings. His criminal conviction meant he had no legal ground to fight. 6 weeks after the plea hearing, it was official. I was free, legally. Work was my next step back into the world. My boss, Isabel, had kept my position open. She arranged for me to work remotely 3 days a week, easing me back in gently. My coworkers were kind without prying. Just being able to open my laptop and think about deadlines and spreadsheets instead of court dates felt like stepping into sunlight after a storm. My hematologist appointment a few weeks later brought good news. My clotting factors were improving slowly but surely. I'd need blood thinners for at least a year, maybe longer, but the doctor was optimistic. Walking out of his office, I remember exhaling deeply. My body was healing, even if my heart wasn't there yet. Then the thick envelope arrived from the prosecutor's office. Inside, the full toxicology report. I sat at my kitchen table, tracing every word with trembling fingers. For months of being dosed, 50 to 100 milligrams daily. The report confirmed everything. Seeing it laid out in black and white didn't hurt less. But it made the nightmare undeniable. Therapy came next. My trauma therapist was in her 50s with a voice that made hard things easier to say. In those early sessions, I kept apologizing for crying about my marriage ending. She gently stopped me. You're not grieving him, she said. You're grieving the life you thought you had. That's different. And she was right. 3 months after the plea, I decided to sell the house. I never wanted to step foot inside that kitchen again. Rosemary handled the sale quietly, with a realtor who didn't make me do open houses. The house sold quickly. The proceeds paid off my medical bills and built my first real emergency fund. A safety net. Then, a letter came through his lawyer, a request to meet with him in some restorative justice session as part of his rehabilitation. I didn't even hesitate. No, I told Rosemary. I don't owe him that. She handled the response. Just like that, the door stayed closed. I joined a support group at a community center across town. The first night, I sat in a circle of folding chairs, surrounded by other survivors. Listening to them was like finally breathing air I hadn't realized I was missing. Andrea, one woman in the group, told me her ex secretly gave her anxiety meds for years. We exchanged numbers after the meeting. Talking to someone who understood medical abuse made me feel less isolated, less strange. 6 months after leaving the hospital, my doctor said something I hadn't dared to hope for. You're healing better than expected. My energy was back. The headaches were gone. We began tapering my medication. My therapist and I started working on trust, on learning what healthy love looks like. I dipped a toe into dating again. Slowly, carefully. The first few dates were awkward, but over time, I learned that healthy people respected boundaries instead of punishing me for having them. When Rosemary called to say the divorce was finalized, it felt like a quiet earthquake. I cried on my couch for a long time, not out of sadness but relief. I began to make the apartment mine, not a hiding place, home. I bought furniture I actually liked, painted the walls a soft blue, hung plants everywhere because I could. Isabel came over to help me pick artwork. We laughed when I bought 3 extra locks for the door. A reading nook by the window became my favorite place in the world. Just me, my chair, and silence that belonged to no one else. I reached out to old friends, rebuilt the life he'd quietly isolated me from. Thursday dinners with Sarah, book clubs, Game nights, real connection, real freedom. Then Roman called in early March. He asked if I'd be willing to speak on a healthcare panel about medical abuse in domestic violence. I said yes without hesitation. 3 weeks later, I sat at a long table in front of 70 healthcare workers. I told them my story, the symptoms I'd ignored, the way he disguised control as concern, the moment the truth came crashing down. Afterward, women came up to me in tears. A nurse whispered, "I think I've seen this before, but I didn't know what to do. Now I do." The 1-year anniversary of that morning, the kitchen, the collapse, the moment everything changed, came on a Tuesday in late March. I took myself to a little Italian restaurant downtown, a place he would have hated. I ordered pasta, wine, and tiramisu. When the waiter asked if I was celebrating something, I smiled. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm celebrating surviving. I was healthy, safe, financially stable, surrounded by people who cared, not controlled. I built this life piece by piece, one terrifying choice at a time, by telling the truth to that doctor, trusting Tabitha, Detective Petrov, and Rosemary, and refusing to let his story become mine. This isn't some movie ending. It's just real life, still unfolding. And I survived it."
Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.